Guten Abend. This is Desert Bounty. I'm Perry. How's it going, guys? So, this episode is going to be about hope, perseverance, and some gardening tips and tricks that I'm using here in the high desert of Arizona. The first thing I want to espouse and talk about is hope. You know, hope is a good thing. People should be hopeful, all right? But in the same breath, I will say this, that hope void of personal responsibility, hope void of critical thinking, and hope void of determination and perseverance is a negative measure. So I wanted to know what the word hope meant. So I looked up in the dictionary, Google's version, and I have to warn you about Wikipedia, about information you get on the internet. I highly recommend you source things 2 or 3 or 4, even 5 times before you take what you're reading as, as the proverbial gospel. I'm finding that AI, Wikipedia, Google, and some other services aren't exactly accurate, or they're modifying the definitions and explanation of things for their own benefit. So, if you're going to go investigate something, multiple source it, all right? And that way you can be sure that the information you're taking up and getting is good. Hope. So you Google hope, and here's the description, all right? A feeling or expectation and desire for a certain outcome or thing to happen. You can be hopeful, or you can critically think and plan and execute. So I'm a veteran. I served my country. And the reason I'm here in the high desert of Arizona is because what's happening in my country doesn't look so good. And maybe that's for another video. I'm going to do one called Tyrants by Design. You'll love that. It's just my take on what I see happening in the world today, and the people who are running the country, our military, our politicians, etc. But right now I want to talk about gardening. Yeah, gardening. Perseverance. This is another description that I wanted to look up, not for a video, but just for my own personal knowledge, okay? I had an idea of what hope meant. I had an idea what perseverance meant. Hearsay. I was in school. I'm certain that I came across this word more than once. English lit, okay? And so I looked it up too. Persistence in doing something despite difficulty or delay in achieving success. Perseverance is important. I don't approach things from a success or failure perspective, but I did for a lot of my life, If I was certain I would fail at something, I wouldn't even try. Now, as I age, I'm engaged in some risky behavior. I take chances, and I embark on things. And it's not without some study. It's not without some preparation. It's not without some critical thinking and investigating. And I'm generally, reasonably guaranteed some form of success. But I don't look at it that way. Everything now for me is a learning curve. I accept the mistakes that I make and I move on. I persevere. And I think it's a good state of mind, a state of living that all of us should embark upon. It's good to be hopeful, but don't lean on it, okay? It's not going to get you very far. Perseverance. Persistence in doing something. Persistence. Despite difficulty or delay in achieving success. Let's replace that word success with goal or, project. So those are the 2 things I wanted to throw out there today because it's on my mind. Love is another one that's on my mind a lot. Love. What is love? Maybe I'll do a video on that. That'll be interesting. My take and perspective on love is not mainstream, but I think it's based in reality and critical thinking and my own personal experience. So I want to move on to gardening. One of the things that I'm doing here on this land at this elevation in this soil type is I have decided to deploy a method that I learned about a decade ago at my last property, and it's called Hügelkultur mound, translated as mound culture. And I'll put a link, or maybe I'll do some editing and I'll show you the Google the Google definition and description of what Hügelkultur is. So Hügelkultur is whereby you stack a layer of logs or wood, sticks, wood. It doesn't really matter what kind of wood. Excuse me. Although I would recommend against like straight cedar or ironwood. Cedar has a pretty caustic oil, and it takes a very long time for the natural elements to break that down. It's okay to have some cedar in there, but I don't think I would do a hugel mound with just straight cedar. So, and maybe I'll go over why that is, beside the fact that it's highly caustic. Its alkalinity is low, and plants struggle to survive in that. So, Hügelkultur is where you take wood, logs, or bigger, depending on the space, or branches, about that big, and you lay them down. In my case, I dug a trench. I lined it with branches. Now, I could have used logs. I have plenty of deadfall laying around here, but I just happen to have a lot of, maybe 1-inch diameter sticks laying around. So what I did is I dug a trench. I laid that in there. And then I have wood chips, primarily cedar, red western cedar, juniper. A local recycling facility here, the people who are trying to dispose of the waste, it's primarily junipers and some other hardwoods and some other species, but primarily red western cedar. So I don't want to put too much of that in there, but almost everything here is junipers. What are you going to do? The deadfall that I'm using has been sun bleached and weathered, in some cases years. And in this dry condition, in this dry environment, it's pretty hardy. Now, some of it's dry rotted, turned to powder. I don't really want to use that. The solid chunks that are still solid, that's pretty much void of the oil from just being sun baked on the surface and weathered over time. It's perfect. It's what I have. So wherever you are, use what you got. I mean, you don't have to go searching out for special species and stuff. Use what you got. So, dug a trench, laid the dry wood in there, and then sprinkled wood chips over it. So, it says here in the definition, you want a base layer, large logs at the bottom. Well, that's up to you, depending on how deep it's going to be and how high you want the mound. And there's really no limit. You can make it as big or as small as you want, depending on what you're going to plant, what you're going to grow. So the first one, the base layer, is large wood. The second layer is branches, twigs, leaves, manure, grass, clippings, kitchen waste, compost, anything organic. So, and this is where you get to control what the roots and what the plants are going to take up, because that stuff's going to break down. The roots are going to take it up, and it's going to provide nutrition for your plants and then for you or your animals. So, the resource that you have available, you want to make sure it's relatively clean. There's no way to get it sterile. There's no way to get it completely clean. Everything's contaminated. But over time, you can reduce or minimize the contamination that's in your hugel mounds. And over time, with continual planting and growing and breaking down, those toxins will be reduced. So, and you can do this method inside of a greenhouse too. It's not just for outside in a garden bed. In a garden, it can be used in a greenhouse as well. I know some people, and I've done this too, I have created my own compost, my own mulch. I've taken peat moss, the big bricks you buy at the weed and feed store, and broken that peat moss down and added it to my soil to create a loamy, breathable, airy soil to plant plants in. And it's worked well for me. A hugel mound is a different approach. This is something that you have to think of in a 5 to 10 year time frame. As time goes on, the bed should get better with minimal upgrades. Okay, you don't really need to keep modifying the bed. The brilliance of this is most of the nutrients that are breaking down from that decaying wood and wood chips and compost and other things that you deposit in there is that it's a constant source of nutrition for the plants. So you don't have to modify the beds too much. I really don't use store-bought fertilizers. I'm of the mindset of compost. Okay, rich compost, scraps that you eat, things that you bring, animal waste, chicken dung, goat dung, rabbit dung, cow dung. These are all good things to add to your compost, to add to your hugel mound, and that gives that extra kick. Now, if you don't have access to any of those things, well, then I guess a nitrogen-rich fertilizer maybe one time is not too bad. Just don't get carried away. And make sure that your fertilizer doesn't contain herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, or insecticides. You don't want any of that. Science is telling us now that the plants are taking it up. It's going in the stems. It's being deposited in the fruit. And we're eating that. And, I'm about trying to minimize that so, it doesn't affect you later in life. You don't want to give it to kids. If you're pregnant, things like that, you want to avoid those chemicals if at all possible. In this day and age, it's kind of hard to do. So, but if you think about it a little bit, you can help yourself and you can minimize your exposure. That's what I'm saying. That's all you can do. It's the best you can do. So, water each layer of the hugel mound as you're building it. Logs, how much water? Do you soak the logs for months and then deposit them in there? I'm going to say no. Just wet them down really good. Take the hose, a little bit of water, preferably rainwater, but city water's okay. Filtered water's best. Rainwater, atmospheric water. It helps break things down quicker. There's a lot more crap in the rainwater. And if you have a garden, it's going to get exposed to the rainwater anyway. Okay? The microbes and the organisms in the soil, as the decaying wood starts to decay, will help break down those toxins. And, plants, they're smart. They're going to take up the nutrients they want. They're going to avoid the stuff they don't want. So even though there may be some residual things in there that it can take up, plants are sensitive. If there's a pocket in there that's got toxins, the roots will probably avoid it. And they'll go for water that's cleaner. And you want to give that root system a chance, a healthy chance at filtering. So hugel mound, in my opinion, is one of the best ways to do that, especially if you're going to repeatedly use it year after year after year. So after you wet everything down, you can build a hugel mound from 1 foot to 5 foot high. It can be 2 feet long. It can be 100 feet long. It's up to you what kind of space you have. Now, as far as what to plant on a hugel mound, this is interesting. I would not recommend planting carrots, obviously, because they're a tuber root that goes down, and if it's hitting hardwood, it's you might have some fruit, some vegetables that are they can't grow in a straight line. Carrots, if you can grow them in a loamy substance where there's no obstructions, no rocks or twigs, then you have nice straight carrots. If you don't mind carrots that are kind of wiggly and growing kind of funky, then plant them in there. Hugel mounds, in my experience, tomato plants. Tomato plants do really well. Any plant that has a real good taproot, root structure, will do well. Peppers, green peppers, habaneros, jalapenos, and other types of sprouting plants like that, beans, peas, legumes, things like that do really well in hugel mounds. I'm going to be experimenting with sunchokes, something I haven't grown before, but I really want to. I'm interested in the starchy tuber. Apparently it's like a sweet potato, and it flowers like a sunflower. So it's beneficial for the wildlife, while it's maturing. And then the tuber under the ground needs no harvest. You can, the sunchokes you can leave right in the ground, and the next year more will sprout. And the longer you leave it, the more it's like a weed. It just starts to propagate itself, so it could take over a space real easy. And that's okay. You can just prune it back, dig them up, wash them off, bring them in the kitchen, and there's quite a few recipes for sunchokes out there. And it's a very good nutritious source, starchy tuber. So I want to do that. I'm excited. Another plant that I plan on propagating here, strawberries, raspberries. I've got onions, a couple different kinds, yellow onions, chives, scallions, wild birdseed. My first hugel mound, maybe you've seen me and my son and I digging over here. We've got a zuni bowl and a hugel mound trench laid out. And I'm going to be planting some sunflowers and wild birdseed on that mound. Now, recently I just transplanted some yuccas over there. I don't know if you know anything about yuccas. Yuccas, the root is the salt plant. I learned this from Navajo grandma. Thanks, Navajo grandma. So, if you look around, you can learn some interesting things. Very good, interesting information that you can use to help yourself and your family. So, a hugel mound. The very last thing for a hugel mound, after you've got the wood in there, wood chips, you've soaked it down good, is you want to add some topsoil. So topsoil can be sandy, loamy, it can be clay. My recommendation is you get it as balanced as you can. You want a good balance of clay, good balance of sand, not too much of one or the other. And it might not be a bad idea to add peat moss to it. Get a brick of peat moss, add that to the topsoil. And you want to have a good topsoil there. So that's what we did here. The tailings we took from the trench. We filled the trench, we lined it. I put a screen over it to kind of help the silts not settle down onto the wood so much. And the roots will tap through that if they get that deep. And that'll just help prevent the silts and the loamy particulates from filling it up and plugging it up. I'm hoping it'll buy it some time. Eventually it will plug up. Nothing you could do about that. And then that screen will decay and break down. And I'm not too worried about the toxins from that. It's not an issue for me. And the roots will then have access all the way beyond the wood. Now above the screen, we did more wood. We did more wood chips. We wetted it down and put topsoil down. Now our topsoil here is sandy. It's loam. It's clay deficient at the surface, very sandy. And it's very lightweight. So I was fortunate enough to get to some clay, and with the wood chips, we made a good topsoil to put over that. Now I'm really not going to modify it any more than that. I'm going to plant directly on top of that. What I am going to do, however, is I'll level it out, and then I'll cover the whole thing in about 2 inches of wood chips. And when I get ready to plant, I'll do seedlings, take them from my soon-to-be little mini greenhouse, and I'll just drop them right in there. And hopefully, in between waterings, I'll water it still. You can't completely rely on the hugel mound. But here in the desert, we have extended periods in the summer where it's very, very hot. And it just sucks the moisture out of everything. And I'm just trying to give those plants, a little bit better comfort zone to be in to help them take the heat. And there's some other practices I'm going to have to think about doing, like shade cloth. Shade cloth, and my first hugel mound over here is positioned intentionally behind a juniper. So the shade from the juniper travels across the hugel mound throughout the day. In the morning when the sun comes up, it's getting full sun, the whole thing. And then right now, we're in the middle of winter, so the sun is real low on the horizon, and I'm watching the shadows. So if you're going to build a hugel mound or you're going to build a raised bed, if you have a wide open space, well, then this dynamic really doesn't affect you. But if you have trees and things like that, in a real hot climate, planting close to or creating beds near trees or other structures is a good idea, because plants really don't need full direct sunlight all the time. If you can get a 60% sun on your plants, you'll have a healthy yield. That's my experience anyway. And of course, if you're in a greenhouse, you have some climate control, some temperature control, other things. You can have more sensitive plants or less hardy plants that really can't take the cold, citrus, moringa, some of those other species that really don't like the cold. And some fruit trees you can have in a greenhouse, prune them down and keep them, miniature, and they'll still produce good fruits for you. And then you can propagate those to the outside, and then maybe they can take the climate. You'll find most plants in their genus, in their seeds, you'll find a seed that does well Fruit trees are kind of hard, 5 to 7 years for a yield. I don't have that kind of time. If I started when I was 10 years old, I suppose I could have really meted this out. Apparently, what I'm hearing from gardeners is some of those trees and citrus-bearing and fruit-bearing trees have the genetics in them to take the cold. And a minimal freeze like we have here is really not a big deal. But if you're paying money for a fruit tree and you're putting it in and you can't take it, well, it's an investment that's lost if you buy it. It's best to propagate these plants on your own, cultivate them from either a small seedling, bring them into your environment, get them acclimated, and then introduce them to your climate, your zone, little by little, and you'll be surprised. Plants are resilient. They can do well even when experts say they won't. So that's my observation anyway. Now, the other thing that the Hügel mound does that I want to talk about is mycelium. Mycelium's a wonderful thing. It's a fungi. I'm a fungi. Sometimes I'm a fungi. Okay. Anyway, mycelium is a vast underground network of branching thread-like filaments called hyphae that form the main body or the thallus of the fungi. So mycelium is underground and it travels underground and it sends out filaments and they're called hyphae. This is something that I've just learned recently, okay? I kind of always knew what mycelium was, but I didn't know the correct terms for the fungus and how they have it broken down into parts, so I'll share it with you. I find it kind of interesting. They're crucial for nutrient cycling in ecosystems. Crucial. Well, they're finding out now, not only crucial, necessary. Now, here in the high desert, in desert conditions, you look around and you see juniper trees all over. And here's what I know. If a plant is thriving somewhere, there's mycelium. All right? There's a mycelium network under there, underground. When I add this Hügelkultur and I start stacking up these logs and I provide moisture for them, this is a rife environment for mycelium to explode. So I'm kind of jump-starting the soil dynamic here. Even though there's mycelium in the ground, I don't see any tomato plants growing around, okay? I don't see any cabbages. I don't see any lettuces, broadleaves, things like that. There are some very hardy, gnarly berries that grow here. They have spines on them, trying to protect themselves from the grazers. And so I know there's a mycelium network here. There must be, otherwise these plants wouldn't be thriving. They have to have a mycelium network. I've seen some studies, some experiments where they put sensors in the ground on these mycelium networks, and when you pull a plant out of the ground that's connected, it warns all the other plants that there's danger. Pretty amazing. Hey, there's a naughty human. And the plants, take defensive action. No, they're not going to fight back. But there's other things that they can do in the future to save themselves from being plucked and pulled out. So something to think about. Plants understand if you're trying to help them or harm them. Maybe you've seen that study where they have 3 office workers and 3 plants and they hook electrodes up to it. And the first 2 people that come in are real nice and pleasant. They talk to the plants. They give the plants water. And then a man comes in and starts yelling and screaming at the other 2 people in the room and goes over and rips a leaf off of one of the plants. The plant screamed, "Ah!" Okay, now here's what's interesting. Several hours pass. There's no one in the room. The first person comes into the room, starts talking to the plants, and then the third person who ripped the leaf off walks in the room. Wasn't in the room 3 seconds, and all the plants start screaming, alerting danger. So they're not sentient. They don't have a conscience like us, but they are intelligent, and they understand danger, and they want to live. And this is something that as humans we need to get back to understanding. They're a life form, and they will cooperate with us. They're okay if we eat the fruit and take the seeds. They're okay. If we take good care of them, they'll do their best to help themselves through your care and cooperation. Isn't that wonderful? It's amazing. So that's something I learned. Mycelium is the underground network by which all these plants communicate and are connected. The mycelium is the main component in breaking down the nutrients and the molecules of everything. And the plants are in a symbiotic, cooperative environment with each other. And the plants thrive where mycelium is thriving. So one of the things I want to do is get a Hügel mound going, because I know that this accelerates that process and provides a different type of mycelium network. So the network that's here, I know some people locally who are planting directly in the ground and are having good success. They're modifying the soils with compost and other organic material to bolster and help the plants that they're planting that aren't indigenous here. And that's wonderful. I plan on doing the same thing, planting directly in the ground. And these Hügelkultur mounds are a way for me to have peace of mind, to know that I have decaying material in the ground that's fostering and helping the mycelium, trapping moisture. So I'm hitting two birds with one stone. I'm laying the communication network down, introducing an environment ripe for the fungus so it can start breaking down the components, and it provides nutrients for the plants above. So that's why I think Hügelkultur is important. So these dry desert conditions, mycelium thrives in the desert, forming crucial underground networks, primarily through symbiotic mycorrhizal fungi that connect with plant roots, boosting water and nutrient absorption. Also is the means by which the plants and fungi communicate. Science fact. I know this. I was pleased to read this in this definition. I was like, yeah, I do that. So the decomposer fungi and saprobes break down dead organic material, enriching the soil. Plants' symbiotic relationships supply sugars, environmental signals to the mycelium in a shared purpose. So the plant roots, as they're taking up the nutrients, there's an exchange that happens. The roots are breaking down and releasing a sugar component that the fungus needs. So the fungus is receiving a benefit from the plant, tapping its roots down into it. It's providing sugars. I found that very interesting. So that's all I have today. I think I've rambled long enough. I'm about the 28-minute mark. I'm Perry. This is Desert Bounty. Thanks for tuning in. And, check out some videos. I got some links below that you can see. Check out the playlist. You can see what we're doing here. We're building stuff. We're trying to create a self-sustainable atmosphere that we can plant food in and help ourselves not eat what they're throwing at us in the stores. Hey, we grocery shop. We still go to the grocery store. We're still eating food from the grocery store, but we're a little bit smarter about what we buy and what we're consuming. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching. I'm Perry. Have a great evening.